Well, Sergey, good evening. Good evening to all of you. Thank you very much for your patience. I know it's been a very long day. It's been a long day for us, too. I'm particularly grateful, Sergey, for your comments and your hospitality. And my sincere thanks to you and President Putin for welcoming me back to Moscow. And thank you for some very candid conversations that you described. And I thank President Putin for the significant time that he shared with me last night. I think we were there about 1 in the morning, covering many bases, but particularly focusing, of course, on Syria. We also talked about issues of enormous concern to the world, issues which are challenging countries and leaders in many parts of the world. And we were reminded in very stark and painful terms of one of those issues last night when we learned of the horrific attack in Nice. And I joined with Sergey, as I did this afternoon when we were privileged to go over to the embassy here in Moscow, the French embassy, put some flowers on a makeshift memorial, and have an opportunity to write condolences in the book. And both of us joined in extending our deepest condolences to the families and to the friends of those killed. I know there were a couple of Americans. My hearts go out particularly to their family, their friends, and we wish a very speedy recovery to those who were injured. There were many of them. No doubt yesterday had a special irony for me because I had the privilege in the morning of standing alongside President Hollande in Paris and the privilege of marking Bastille Day, the National Day of France. How profoundly shocking to see a day of national celebration turned into a night of horror and of mourning. Our countries, I know from my conversations with President Putin yesterday and Sergei Lavrov today, we will continue to stand together in this time of tragedy, and we will stand with France in our shared fight against violent extremism worldwide. And I know we will do everything in our power to support the French people at this time. Another tragedy, yet again, for France. What is certain is that none of us will ever be intimidated by the forces that seek to divide and terrorize nations. No act of terror can shake the bonds of friendship between the United States and France, nor undermine the values that join us together as allies and partners, the very values that we celebrated on Bastille Day: liberty, equality, and fraternity. Now, it is inescapable that these horrendous attacks, the night before I began my conversations with President Putin and here today with Sergei Lavrov, underscore the degree to which making progress against terrorists and resolving the conflict in Syria, particularly, is absolutely critical. So we met here in Moscow over these last hours because, as everyone knows, the cessation of hostilities has come under huge stress in recent months. And still in Syria, too many innocent people are dying. Too many terrorists are waging war against civilization itself. On the first hand, the Assad regime has relentlessly continued indiscriminate attacks contrary to the agreements of the ISSG and the UN Security Council. But on the other side, the terrorist group Jabhat al-Nusra, the al-Qaeda branch in Syria, has also launched its own offensives, sometimes with members of different oppositions joining with them. And the result has been a cycle of excuses for continuing to fight each other, with a steady deterioration of a hard-fought-for cessation of hostilities in the process. And that has resulted in the killing of civilians, more refugees, more displaced persons, more radicalization, more terrorism, and ultimately an increasing sense of hopelessness among the people of Syria. Russia and the United States have come together with the belief, as Sergei expressed, that when Russia and the United States put their mind to it and try deliberately and with purpose to have an impact on an issue, as we did on chemical weapons in Syria, as we did with respect to the joint plan of action for Iran, as we did in passing a monumental initiative in Paris on climate change. When we come together with that purpose, we have an ability to make a difference. And so we came together here, and we have agreed to steps that, if implemented in good faith, can address two serious problems that I just described about the cessation. It is possible to help restore the cessation of hostilities, significantly reduce the violence, and help create the space for a genuine and credible political transition. Now, the concrete steps that we have agreed on are not going to be laid out in public in some long list, because we want them to work and because they need more work in order to work. I want to emphasize, though, they are not based on trust. They define specific, sequential responsibilities all parties to the conflict must assume, with the intent of stopping altogether the indiscriminate bombing of the Assad regime and stepping up our efforts against al-Nusra. Now, there are further steps that we need to work on. We both accepted that responsibility. In order to implement this approach, our teams will need to meet and work through some details. Each of us know exactly what we have to do. And I know, and Sergei knows, that there are spoilers who will make every effort to try to disrupt this initiative. And we also know, and this is important, the results will not be tomorrow or the next day. It will not be immediate. But our patience also is not limitless. International efforts have failed the Syrian people for far too long. We know that. After 5 years of war, the people of Syria don't want words, they want action, and they deeply want to be able to live in peace. And we, of course, took every effort over the course of the last hours, many hours, focusing on how to try to make this real. And we believe the best way to make it real is to go about a quiet business, which is the prerequisite of being able to implement the things that we think should be implemented. Now, as Sergei related to you, we had a very, very full agenda. We discussed almost every other issue of concern, from bilateral relationship to Ukraine, implementation of Minsk, Yemen, Middle East peace, as Sergei described, Libya, and so forth. And we talked specifically further about Nagorno-Karabakh, where we have both been involved as members of the Minsk, as co-chairs of Minsk, together with our French counterpart, Jean-Marc Ayrault. We are working on that issue. And I appreciate President Putin's leadership. I appreciate Sergei's initiative in visiting the capitals and working with the presidents. I had the privilege of meeting with both presidents in Warsaw just the other day, and we are deeply encouraging, all of us, of an effort to move away from war and move towards the potential of peace for a long, long frozen conflict. Just last month, President Putin met with the leaders of Azerbaijan and Armenia in St. Petersburg. And when I saw them in Warsaw, they were grateful for that, and they talked further about ways we might try to go forward. It is clearly in everyone's interest to avoid a new outbreak of fighting, and I am confident that with Russian, American, and French support, the potential for progress is there. Foreign Minister Lavrov and I will continue to consult on this issue and will remain in regular contact with both presidents in order to try to encourage a peaceful and a permanent solution. In closing, I just want to remind everyone that yesterday marked 1 year since the United States, Russia, China, and our partners in Europe finalized an agreement that blocks Iran's potential pathways to building a nuclear weapon. And that was an agreement that we can proudly say has made the world a safer place. Reaching that agreement required cooperation, coordination, and a consistent commitment by both of our nations, Russia, the United States, and the others, to diplomacy, to non-proliferation, and to a future that is less dangerous and more secure and more peaceful. It is absolutely in that spirit that we have come together in Moscow today. And it is in that spirit that we strive to replicate our efforts in confronting the crises in Syria, Ukraine, Nagorno-Karabakh, and elsewhere. And so with that, again, I thank my host, Sergei Lavrov, and we'd be happy to take questions unless the host would.